While working 250 feet up on a wind turbine, I received a photo that shattered my world. My wife wasn't just cheating. She was planning to destroy me financially. But what Faith and her lover didn't realize, when you're used to working at deadly heights, you learn to turn fear into focused strategy. By the time I confronted them, I'd already moved the pieces on our chessboard. Now it was checkmate. My name is Jerome Bowen, and I'm 37 years old. For the past decade, I've been a wind turbine technician, scaling those giant metal beasts that the landscapes of the Midwest. It's a job that takes me away from home for days at a time, working at heights that would make most people's stomachs turn. But I've always loved the freedom of it. Just me, the wind, and the open sky. The pay is good too, which helped us buy our dream house in the suburbs of Chicago 2 years ago. It was during one of those routine maintenance trips to a wind farm in Iowa that my buddy Jordan sent me a text with a photo attached. Hanging with some friends downtown last night. Thought you might want to see this. The picture showed a group of people at what looked like a fancy cocktail bar. In the background, partially obscured but clearly visible, was my wife Faith, leaning in close to a man I didn't recognize. Their body language said everything. This wasn't a casual conversation between acquaintances. I called Jordan immediately, my hands shaking as I gripped the phone. "How long have you known?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite being suspended 250 feet in the air on a turbine platform. Jordan's voice was hesitant. "I've seen them together twice now. I wasn't sure what to do, man. I'm sorry." The next 3 days were torture. I had to finish the job before I could head home. Company policy didn't allow for personal emergencies unless someone was in the hospital. So I channeled my anger into my work, checking and rechecking turbine components with mechanical precision while my personal life was spinning out of control. When I finally drove up to our driveway, Faith's car was there. I sat in my truck for a good 10 minutes, collecting myself, deciding how to approach this. I could confront her immediately, but without solid proof beyond Jordan's photo, she could easily deny everything. No, I needed more information. I walked in with my usual duffel bag, greeted by Faith's seemingly genuine smile and embrace. She smelled different, a new perfume I hadn't bought her. "How was the trip?" she asked, taking my bag like nothing was wrong. "Educational," I replied, watching her face carefully. "Learned some interesting things." That night, while Faith slept soundly beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan. Tomorrow, I decided I'd start digging. After 10 years of marriage, I deserved to know the truth, however painful it might be. And once I had it, I'd have to decide what kind of man I was going to be about it. The next morning, I woke up before Faith and grabbed her phone from the nightstand. We'd always had each other's passwords, a trust thing, or so I thought. The guilt of snooping lasted about 5 seconds, right until I opened her messaging app and found conversations with someone saved as LWR Project. I scrolled through, my stomach nodding with each exchange. The messages went back 4 months, flirtatious at first, then explicit. There were plans for meetups, hotel confirmations, even a thread about how to hide things from me. Faith had sent this guy a photo of herself wearing lingerie I'd bought for our anniversary. "Making sure it fits for our weekend," the message read. The guy, Lance, based on the context, had responded, "Can't wait to take it off you." I took screenshots, sending them to my own phone before carefully replacing hers exactly as I found it. Then I slipped out of bed and went downstairs to make coffee, my mind racing with what to do next. When Faith came down 30 minutes later, I was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 mugs of coffee, acting like my world hadn't just imploded. "Morning, babe," she said, kissing the top of my head before taking her coffee. "You're up early." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Got a call from the company. They want me to head out to the North Dakota site tomorrow. Turbines acting up again." This was a lie, but I needed time to think, to plan. Faith's face showed a flash of something. Relief? Before she composed herself. "Again? You just got back," she said, though her protest lacked conviction. "That's the job," I replied. "Good thing we installed those security cameras last month. I'll be able to check on the house while I'm gone." Faith's coffee mug paused halfway to her lips. We didn't have security cameras. I watched as she processed this, trying to decide if I was bluffing. "Of course," she said finally, her voice carefully neutral. "That's reassuring." After breakfast, I called my supervisor and arranged for an actual assignment in North Dakota, calling in a favor he owed me. Then I contacted a private investigator recommended by a coworker who'd gone through a similar situation. The PI, a former police detective named Malone, agreed to surveillance while I was away. "I'll need details on the suspected other party," Malone said during our brief meeting that afternoon. I showed him the photo Jordan had sent, plus a license plate number I'd managed to identify from Faith's location, sharing which frequently showed her at an apartment complex across town. "Lance Davidson," Malone confirmed after running the plate. "Works at City Trust Bank downtown. Married, no kids." The double betrayal, a married man, made it even worse somehow. As I packed my bags that evening, Faith was unusually attentive, even suggesting we have dinner at my favorite steakhouse. During the meal, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'll miss you," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "Be safe up there." I wondered if she was already texting Lance, making plans for my absence. The thought made me grip my knife harder as I cut into my steak. "Always am," I responded evenly. "After all, I have plenty to come home to." Faith smiled, unaware that our marriage was already in free fall, like a worker who'd slipped from a turbine without a safety harness. The only question now was how hard the landing would be. 6 months before everything fell apart, I'd received a warning about Faith that I chose to ignore. My coworker Vince had pulled me aside during a maintenance run in Colorado. "I don't know how to tell you this," Vince had said, his weathered face showing genuine concern. "But I saw your wife last weekend at the Lakeside Hotel bar with some guy. They seemed pretty friendly." I dismissed it immediately. Faith was visiting her sister in Milwaukee last weekend. Vince had just shrugged. "Maybe she has a doppelganger, then. Just thought you should know." Now, as I drove toward North Dakota, that conversation replayed in my mind. I never even mentioned it to Faith. Instead, I convinced myself that Vince was mistaken, or worse, trying to cause trouble. The truth was, I hadn't wanted to face the possibility. 3 days into my assignment, Malone sent me photos and a detailed report. Faith had picked up Lance from his office the day after I left. They'd gone straight to our house, where they'd stayed for 6 hours before going out to dinner. The photos showed them kissing in our driveway, his hand possessively on her hip. I pulled over at a rest stop, unable to drive through the rage clouding my vision. The ultimate disrespect, bringing him into our home, probably our bed. I punched the steering wheel hard enough to bruise my knuckles, then leaned back and forced myself to breathe. When I could think clearly again, I called my bank and transferred half of our joint savings to my personal account. Then I called our financial advisor. "Jerome, glad you called," he said. "I was going to reach out. Faith tried to access your retirement accounts yesterday. Said you were planning to consolidate some investments." My blood ran cold. "I authorized no such thing. Lock everything down." "Already did," he assured me. "Required both signatures anyway. But you two might want to get on the same page." We already were, I thought bitterly, just reading different books. That evening in my hotel room, I received another call from Malone. "There's something else you should know," he said grimly. "Your wife accessed your home office. Took photos of documents. Based on what I could see through the window, looks like financial statements, account numbers." I thanked him and hung up, a new kind of anger building. This wasn't just betrayal. This was calculation. Faith wasn't just sleeping with Lance. They were planning something bigger. I spent the night making my own plans, calling in favors from friends, setting up financial safeguards. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I checked out of my hotel and started the long drive home, unannounced. Sometimes the best defense is a surprise offense, and Faith had no idea what was coming. As the miles disappeared under my tires, my resolve hardened. The man returning to Chicago wasn't the same one who had left. That man had been betrayed, but this one wouldn't be blindsided again. I arrived home 2 days early, parking a block away and approaching on foot. Faith's car was in the driveway, along with an unfamiliar Audi, Lance's, presumably. Perfect. Instead of barging in, I circled to our neighbor Walt's house. Walt was a retired Marine who had always liked me more than Faith. "Jerome, thought you were out of town," he said, surprised to find me at his door. "Need a favor, Walt. Can I cut through your backyard of mine? And maybe borrow a few minutes on your deck?" Walt's eyes narrowed, understanding immediately. "Saw a strange car over there yesterday, too. Deck's all yours, son." From Walt's elevated deck, I had a clear view into our bedroom window. The curtains were open, and there they were, Faith and Lance, lounging in our bed, drinking what looked like my collector bourbon. I took photos with my phone, then texted Malone to meet me at a coffee shop nearby. When he arrived, I slid an envelope across the table. "Final payment," I said, "and a bonus for going above and beyond." Malone nodded appreciatively. "What's your next move?" "Information gathering," I replied. "I need to know what they're planning before I make my move." I returned to Walt's, where he generously offered me his guest room for as long as you need to sort this out. From there, I contacted a cybersecurity buddy who owed me a favor. By nightfall, I had remote access to Faith's email and cloud storage. What I found confirmed my worst suspicions. Faith and Lance have been planning this for months, discussions about how much money I had, how to access it, even joking about how oblivious I was. There was a document titled Exit Strategy that outlined how Faith could maximize her take in a divorce. But the most damning was an audio file. Faith had been recording our conversations, trying to provoke me into saying something threatening she could use against me. In our last argument before my trip, she'd repeatedly pushed my buttons, then played the victim when I raised my voice in frustration. "That's gold," Lance's voice said on the recording after I'd left the room. "If he ever gets physical, even better. Your lawyer will take him to the cleaners." I sat back, cold clarity washing over me. This wasn't just an affair. This was warfare, and they thought I was unarmed on the battlefield. The next morning, I made an appointment with the best divorce attorney in Chicago, a stone-cold litigator who specialized in cases involving financial manipulation and infidelity. Then I called my boss. "Need another week off," I said. "Family emergency." "Everything okay?" he asked. I smiled grimly. "Not yet, but it will be." For the next 3 days, I became a ghost in my own life. From Walt's guest room, I monitored Faith and Lance's activities while methodically building my case. Walt, understanding the situation without needing details, became my ally in this strange surveillance operation. "Another delivery for your wife," he reported one afternoon. "Champagne. Celebrating something. Looks like." I nodded grimly. "Their future, probably. She thinks I'm still in North Dakota." Faith had been calling me daily with increasingly elaborate stories about her mundane activities, grocery shopping, visiting her mother, girls' night out. Each lie delivered with practiced ease. I played along, responding with equal dishonesty about turbine repairs and weather delays. On the 4th day, my attorney Jessica Mills called with news. "The financial protections are in place," she confirmed. "Your personal accounts and retirement funds are secured. The evidence you provided is compelling for proving adultery and financial misconduct." "What about the house?" I asked. "The home we'd bought together, where Lance now slept in my bed. Given the evidence of her bringing a paramour into the marital home, we have a strong case," Jessica explained. "But there's something else you should know." She paused, and I braced myself. "Your wife has already consulted with 3 divorce attorneys in the city. One of them is Thomas Brenner." I knew the name. Brenner was notorious for aggressive tactics and astronomical fees. "She hasn't retained anyone yet," Jessica continued, "but she's shopping for the most cutthroat representation." After hanging up, I sat with this information. Faith was planning to blindside me with divorce papers, likely when I returned from my trip. The ultimate ambush. That evening, as I was reviewing more evidence, Walt knocked on my door. "They're packing boxes into his car," he reported. "Looks like your electronics. Some artwork." I was across the street and watching from behind a neighbor's hedge within minutes. Lance's Audi was loaded with items from our house. My home theater system, Faith's jewelry collection, and, alarmingly, what looked like my fireproof document safe. When they drove away, I used my key to enter my own home, silently, finding it disturbingly transformed. Faith had rearranged furniture, replaced our wedding photos with new artwork, and created a space that erased my existence. In our bedroom, Lance's clothes hung in my closet. Fighting cold fury, I photographed everything, then replaced the emptied safe with an identical one containing carefully selected documents. Bank statements showing transfers to my new secured accounts, copies of the evidence I gathered, and a letter from my attorney outlining the consequences of theft and financial misconduct in divorce proceedings. Then I returned to Walt's house and waited, watching through binoculars as Faith and Lance returned later that night, drunk and laughing. Tomorrow, I decided, watching them stumble into my house. Tomorrow would change everything. The next morning, I met with an old client who owned a private security firm. I need everything that happens in my house recorded. I explained. Legally, with proper documentation. By noon, I had a court order authorizing surveillance of my own property based on evidence of theft. By 3, a team of professionals had discreetly installed cameras in the common areas of my house while Faith was at work. That same afternoon, I visited a specialized storage facility in downtown Chicago, converting a significant portion of our liquid assets into physical gold and silver. The metal felt solid and reassuring in my hands, tangible wealth that couldn't be electronically transferred or hacked. "We'll store this in your private vault, Mr. Bowen," the facility manager assured me. "Accessible only with your biometric confirmation." I nodded, signing the necessary paperwork. "And the location details?" "Encrypted in this key," he replied, handing me a specialized USB drive. "Without it and your fingerprint, the vault might as well not exist." That evening, I returned to Walt's house to find him cleaning his prized shotgun collection on the back porch. "Company coming?" I asked, settling into a chair beside him. Walt smiled grimly. "Just being prepared. Noticed your wife's boyfriend carrying something that looked like a handgun case from his car this morning." My stomach tightened. "You sure? 20 years in the Marines. I know what a gun case looks like, son." I processed this new information carefully. Lance with a gun complicated things. I hadn't anticipated potential physical danger in this scenario. "Got something for you," Walt said, interrupting my thoughts. He reached behind him and produced a small recording device. "Military grade. Undetectable. Better than your phone for what you're doing." I took it gratefully. "Thanks, Walt. For everything." "Man protects what's his," Walt replied simply. "Or makes damn sure nobody else gets it." Later that night, I received an alert from the new surveillance system. Faith and Lance were in my home office, attempting to open the replaced safe. The camera caught Faith's expression of shock when she found my attorney's letter instead of the financial documents they'd expected. Lance's face contorted with rage as he read the contents. Then he slammed the safe shut. I watched with grim satisfaction as their plans began to unravel. They thought they were dealing with a trusting fool who would never see the betrayal coming. Instead, they'd awakened something much more dangerous. A man with nothing left to lose and everything to protect. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I would return home, officially, and set the final phase in motion. The morning of my official return, I dressed with precision in my best suit, charcoal gray, power tie, cufflinks Faith had given me for our 5th anniversary. A reminder of better days that now served as armor. Before leaving Walt's, I checked my phone. 5 missed calls from Faith since dawn. The surveillance system had caught her frantically searching the house after discovering the safe swap, making panic calls, presumably to Lance and divorce attorneys. "You sure about going in alone?" Walt asked as I gathered my things. "I could back you up." I shook my head. "This is between me and Faith. But I appreciate the offer." "Phone on record," he confirmed. I patted my pocket where the military-grade recorder sat. Everything covered. The drive across the street felt surreal, crossing a battlefield in plain sight of the enemy. When I pulled into my driveway, Faith appeared at the front door, her face a mask of composure that didn't match her frantic movements on the surveillance feed hours earlier. "Jerome, you're home early," she exclaimed, moving to embrace me. I sidestepped her, walking past into the house that no longer felt like home. Evidence of Lance was everywhere. His jacket on the coat rack, his preferred beer in the fridge, his cologne lingering in the air. "We need to talk," I said, setting my bag down in the living room. Faith's smile faltered but held. "Of course. Let me make you some coffee. You must be exhausted from the drive." "I'm fine," I replied, my voice steady. "Sit down, Faith." She complied, perching nervously on the edge of the sofa. "Is everything okay? You sound serious." I studied her face. This woman I'd loved for a decade, now transformed into a stranger plotting my financial ruin. "I know about Lance," I said simply. Faith blinked rapidly, momentary panic replaced by practiced confusion. "Lance? What are you talking about?" "Lance Davidson, City Trust Bank. Married man. Your lover. The man who's been sleeping in my bed, drinking my bourbon, and helping you plan how to take me for everything in a divorce." Her face drained of color, but she recovered quickly. "You're being ridiculous. I don't know what you think." "Stop," I interrupted, raising my hand. "The time for lies is over. I have everything, photos, videos, recordings, your emails planning asset transfers. Everything. Faith's expression hardened, mask falling away completely. You've been spying on me? That's illegal. Actually, it's not. Not when it's my house, my accounts, and my wife conspiring to commit fraud. She changed tactics, tears suddenly appearing. Jerome, please. Whatever you think is happening, we can work through this. We've been together too long to throw everything away. I almost admired her performance. Almost. There's nothing to work through, I replied evenly. This marriage ended the moment you betrayed me. Not just with Lance, but with your calculated plan to destroy me financially. Faith stood abruptly, tears vanishing. You have no idea what I'm capable of. You think you're so clever with your little investigation, but you won't win this. I already have, I said calmly. My attorney filed for divorce this morning. The papers will be delivered to you today. Given the evidence, the judge has frozen all joint accounts and prohibited removal of assets from the home, retroactively, meaning the items you and Lance have already taken must be returned, or it's theft. Her face contorted with rage. You bastard. I deserve half of everything. Half of what we built together, perhaps. I conceded. Not everything I worked for before you, and certainly not through fraud and theft. Faith snatched a vase from the coffee table and hurled it against the wall. I didn't flinch as it shattered. Get out, she screamed. I stood my ground. No, Faith. This time you get out. The next 24 hours were a cold war in our suburban battlefield. Faith refused to leave, camping in the guest room while bombarding me with alternating threats and tearful pleas for reconciliation. You'll regret this, she hissed over breakfast. When I'm done, you won't have a penny left. I sipped my coffee calmly. Hard to accomplish with audio recordings of you discussing your fraudulent plans. By mid-afternoon, the doorbell rang. Faith's divorce attorney, Thomas Brenner himself, stood on our porch with a smug expression that faltered when I greeted him by name. Mr. Bowen, he began formally. I've been retained by your wife to discuss settlement terms. Interesting timing, I replied, stepping aside to let him enter. Since my attorney filed first this morning. In the living room, Faith sat with artificial composure. Brenner took a seat beside her, withdrawing papers from his briefcase. We have a settlement proposal that's quite generous under the circumstances. I laughed, actually laughed. Before you continue, you should know I have extensive evidence of conspiracy to commit financial fraud, theft of marital assets, and adultery in the marital home. Brenner's expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened around his pen. Allegations require proof, Mr. Bowen. Which I have in abundance, I replied, sliding across a thumb drive. A sample. Emails, photos, video, audio recordings. My complete file is with my attorney and backed up in multiple locations. Faith paled. You're bluffing. Would you like me to play the recording where you and Lance discuss how to hide assets during divorce? Or perhaps the one where you coach him on accessing my retirement accounts? I turned to Brenner. As an officer of the court, you should know continuing to pursue fraudulent claims could constitute malpractice. Brenner reviewed the thumb drive's contents on his laptop, his face growing grimmer with each click. Finally, he closed it and turned to Faith. We need to discuss our approach privately. After they conferred in whispers, Brenner addressed me with newfound respect. My client would like to propose alternative terms. I'm sure she would, I replied. But here's my only offer. Faith leaves this house today. She takes her personal belongings, nothing more. All financial matters will be handled through court with full disclosure of her conspiracy with Lance Davidson. Faith stood up, face contorted with fury. You can't do this. I need time to remove more assets, to fabricate evidence. No, I interrupted. You have until 5 p.m. After that, I'll add breaking and entering to the complaint, since you'll no longer have legal right to be here. You'd throw away 10 years of marriage? Faith asked, suddenly playing the hurt wife. I met her gaze steadily. I didn't throw it away, Faith. You did. When you asked for an open marriage last month, I knew it was just your way of covering what you were already doing. But you know what? An open marriage isn't necessary, because we're already finished. You're free to go with whoever's been waiting for you. Her facade crumbled completely. Jerome, please. 5 o'clock. I repeated firmly, turning to leave the room. Not a minute later. Faith was gone by 4:30, taking only clothing and personal items under the watchful eye of Walt, who volunteered as witness. No words were exchanged, just the hollow sounds of suitcases being dragged and car doors slamming. The house felt emptier, yet somehow cleaner after she left. That evening, Jordan called. "Heard what happened. You okay, man?" "Getting there," I replied, nursing a glass of bourbon on my back deck. "Should have listened to you earlier. Don't beat yourself up. You trusted her. That's what marriage is supposed to be." The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and paperwork. Faith contested the divorce initially, but her position weakened when Lance's wife discovered their affair and filed for divorce herself, naming Faith as correspondent. Lance abandoned Faith once his own marriage imploded. According to mutual acquaintances, he claimed Faith had manipulated and misled him, the same story he'd likely use with the next vulnerable woman. One rainy Tuesday, my attorney called with unexpected news. "Faith wants to meet," Jessica said. "No lawyers, just you two. Says she has something important to discuss." Every instinct warned against it, but curiosity won out. We met at a neutral coffee shop downtown, Faith arriving in designer clothes that couldn't hide her exhaustion. "Thank you for coming," she began, hands wrapped around her mug. "I wanted to apologize." I said nothing, waiting. "What I did was unforgivable," she continued. "Lance left me as soon as things got difficult. Everything you warned about came true. Is that what this is about?" I asked, voice level. "You need money now that your backup plan fell through." Faith flinched. "I deserve that. But no, I'm leaving Chicago after the divorce. Starting over somewhere else." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were signed documents accepting my original settlement terms. The bare minimum legally required. No alimony. "Why now?" I asked, suspicious of the sudden capitulation. Faith looked away. "Lance wasn't the first. There were others. I've been unfaithful for years. You didn't deserve any of it." The admission should have hurt, but instead brought only clarity. The woman I'd loved had never really existed. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said, standing to leave. Faith caught my hand. "How did you know? When did you first suspect?" I gently pulled away. "When you stopped looking at me like I mattered. Everything else was just gathering evidence." Walking out, I realized I felt nothing for her anymore. No anger, no love, no regret. Just the lightness of truth and the anticipation of an unwritten future. 3 months passed before the divorce was finalized. Faith left town immediately after, reportedly moving to Florida with minimal fanfare. Lance's divorce proved messier. His wife had learned from my example and gathered substantial evidence of his pattern of infidelity and financial misconduct. I threw myself into work, taking on the most challenging turbine repairs that required climbing to dizzying heights where the air was clean and problems had straightforward solutions. The physical exertion and focus required left little room for dwelling on the past. On the anniversary of the day, I discovered Faith's betrayal. Jordan and Walt organized an impromptu cookout on Walt's deck. To new beginnings, Jordan toasted, raising his beer. Walt nodded sagely, and to seeing clearly from higher ground. Later that evening, as we watched the sunset, Walt handed me a small wooden box. "Made this for you," he said gruffly. "From the deck boards we replaced last summer." Inside was a polished compass, expertly crafted. The needle pointed steadily north despite the turmoil it had endured in transformation. "Thought you could use it," Walt said, "for whatever's next." The next day, I received a call from my supervisor. A major wind farm project in Colorado needed an experienced lead technician. 2 years minimum, substantial pay increase, chance for advancement. "You're the best man for the job," he said, "but it means relocating. Need your answer by Friday." I looked around the house that had once represented my future with Faith. Despite reclaiming it, memories lingered in every corner. The compass on my coffee table pointed toward possibilities, not ghosts. When I called Walt to share the news, his response was immediate. "When do we list the house?" I laughed. "You think I should take it?" "Son, climbing higher is what you do best. Always has been." He was right. The skills that served me well on turbines had saved me in life. Staying calm under pressure, securing safety lines before making bold moves, and most importantly, trusting my own grip even when the ground seemed impossibly far away. 2 months later, I stood atop my first Colorado turbine, surveying endless mountains under a perfect blue sky. The air was thinner here, but I breathed deeper than I had in years. Some might call it running away, but I recognized it for what it was, ascending to higher ground, where the view clarifies everything below.